Is monetization a very important part of product, market, and the channels in which you're promoting? Is that the trial fit? Is monetization an important part of that? And how do you generally generate revenue for, let's say, for the product that has very minimal use cases, as we just spoke about, or let's say a lack of interest in the initial period? How do you focus on getting revenue for such products?
Yeah, so I'd say monetization as it relates to product market fit, it determines what growth loops are going to be possible, right? I don't think monetization is required for product market fit. So if you look at Pinterest or Facebook or Snap in the early days, they all grew for years without making money. But I would say they had clear product market fit during those years. So it's more about whether you are sequencing to a sustainable business model and company than whether you have it absolutely at this very moment, right? Ads, for example, needs scale. SaaS doesn't, unless the value prop is around gathering a massive amount of data or something. Like our marketing tools at Eventbrite, we need scale for that because we're using our data to more effectively, target who's going to buy tickets for you than if you try to do advertising on your own. That's a scale value prop, right? Which is why it was our second product, not our first. For Pinterest, we were, I think, 5 years in before we tried to make $1, because we just needed to have like 100 million users to be attractive to advertisers. So anything you're doing to grow, if it's not scalable as a startup, that's okay, but it needs to be helping you get to a state where something is scalable growth. That might be building a network effect, like a Grubhub, or building enough data to personalize recommendations and ads like Pinterest and Eventbrite, but know what next milestone it's getting you to help you make the business more sustainable, in one incremental fashion, right? So that's how I think about monetization as part of the product market fit kind of calculus, right? And in terms of trying to make your first dollar and whatnot, it really depends a lot on what type of business you're building. Does the market exist or not exist? And there's a lot of really kind of custom questions you need to go through there, right? So, an example that comes to mind is Figma, right? So Figma is a company we invested in when I was at Greylock. It's a design tool that's now used by, it seems like every product designer in tech, but obviously when it launched, that was not the case. And I think early on people were like, oh, well, how big a market is like product designers? Is that like going to be like a really important market that can build $1 billion business? Which now sounds like a crazy question to ask. But at the time, it was definitely something investors asked. So early on, right, like they didn't have enterprise plans. The SaaS fee was a really small number. None of the revenue numbers looked particularly impressive, but it's about whether you're building the key tool for what is a very key function in every tech business, which is building a great user experience. And I think their core insight is that design is collaborative, right? Not just between other designers, but between your product manager and your engineers. So building a product that can be accessible from the web, that enables everyone to look at the most up-to-date version of the design and not send version 15A, out was really key thing. So, early on, you're looking at these SaaS revenue numbers, they're not very impressive. And now, you could probably go to a lot of these companies and say like, well, if I charged you 10x more like for Figma, would you churn? And the answer would be absolutely not, right? So they're now building this pricing power, and how they want to leverage that, of course, depends on their loops and how fast they want to grow versus how much profit they want to make. These are all levers that founders can pull over time. But again, it's not about day one, whether Figma is making $50 per user or $5 per user. It's as we build towards a sustainable company 10 years out, what that's going to look like. And it might be $500 or $5,000 a user at that point in time, in which case that's going to be a very attractive business, right? And I think in their case, they are building a very attractive business. So if you could tell that story as a founder of what this is sequencing to, that is more important than necessarily how much money you're making day one. If you're bootstrapping, you're going to need to make some money day one, or else there's no way to fund the growth of the business. Or you might need to make some revenue to prove to investors that there's a lot more revenue to make. Something I always counsel founders on that I advise is the most important thing to building a sustainable business is the next milestone that's going to convince investors to give you more money to go unlock the next milestone of the business if more money is what's required. If more money is not what required because you have a great business model already, then just focus on the next milestone that helps the business. But if money's required to get to that, then your next milestone is whatever the people who have money that may want to give it to you think is the most important next milestone. And that might not be perfectly aligned, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay, right? Of course, it's your job as a founder to convince them what the important milestones should be. But if they're like, hey, I just need you to see you make 10 million in ARR to give you more money, sometimes you got to like pivot your plan to show that you can make 10 million ARR or whatever that milestone is. And that's okay.